Seeing his daughter's innocent face, Yoon Jae-hyuk's heart grew even more conflicted. Should he turn a blind eye to injustice for the sake of his child's future? Or should he muster the courage to make the world she would live in a little more just? Hana's eyes were filled with sincerity. She promised Lee Seo-yeon legal help. And what's more, she offered her full support to help her get back on her feet as a designer. Not in the name of Cheonmu Group, but in the name of a small foundation for justice. Kang Hana. She existed like an island, an anomaly in this dazzling world, with her hair tied back, her face bare of makeup, and a neat uniform that fit her perfectly. Her presence was deliberately erased, faint, and unassuming. She was just an ordinary employee at Surgan, the most exclusive Korean cuisine corner, yet her movements were flawlessly efficient. Taking orders, serving food, and clearing tables, every action was precise and seamless, like a well-choreographed dance. Her eyes were always on the lookout for a customer's needs, and her expression was fixed in a smile of unforced kindness. Her colleagues knew her only as a quiet and diligent person. Not a single one of them could have ever imagined that behind her faint presence lay a monumental secret. She was the sole heiress to the Cheonmu Group, a titan of the South Korean business world. Lee Seo-yeon felt something hot that had been long forgotten well up in her chest. It was tears. She began to sob like a child. All the sorrow, anger, and despair she had suppressed for the past few years erupted at once. Hana silently put her arm around her shoulder. Hana had deliberately chosen this life. After her father, Chairman Kang, passed away, she was raised under her grandfather's shadow, receiving an emperor's education. But she rejected the idea of learning about the world from numbers alone, from behind high, fortified walls. She wanted to experience the world's raw reality for herself, to see the true faces and lives of people at the very bottom. So, she shed everything and plunged into this world, a place both glamorous and fiercely competitive, the front line of the service industry. After weeping for a long time, Lee Seo-yeon wiped her tears and brought an old box from a corner of the room. The box contained all the materials from her time running Luna Seoul, the threatening messages Choi Min-hyuk had sent her, a voice recording of his demands, and even her original design sketchbook that he had tried to take from her. That day, Hana was, as usual, working silently. After the lunch rush, a particularly loud voice echoed through the quieter food court. It belonged to Choi Min-hyuk, the son of Session Department Store's chairman, and his girlfriend, Kim Yoo-ra, a famous influencer. Choi Min-hyuk was a man whose arrogance seemed to radiate from him. He ostentatiously shook his wrist, showing off an expensive luxury watch, and would often summon staff with a disdainful tilt of his chin. Kim Yoo-ra clung to his side, enjoying the attention with a coquettish laugh. "This is everything I have. Min-hyuk, the food here is really not great. My dad's hotel buffet is so much better," Kim Yoo-ra complained, pouting her lips. She handed the box to Hana with a trembling hand. It was more than just evidence. It was her crushed dream, her stolen life. Choi Min-hyuk stroked her hair, pacifying her. "Come on. This is the most expensive place in our department store. Just think of it as a fun experience. I'll take you somewhere much better later." When Hana left Lee Seo-yeon's rooftop apartment, the sky was already stained red. A new fire was burning in her heart. Her personal anger toward Choi Min-hyuk had now been elevated to a greater sense of purpose. This was no longer just a battle between Kang Hana and Choi Min-hyuk. It was the beginning of a holy war for the countless Lee Seo-yeons in the world. To reclaim stolen justice, she had decided to become not a simple avenger, but a judge. Their conversation was loud enough for everyone to hear, but no one dared to show any sign of complaint. Everyone knew that crossing Choi Min-hyuk meant certain termination. Hana placed a meticulously arranged meal set on their table. Unfazed by their conversation, she recited her practiced line like a robot. New pieces were placed on Kang Hana's chessboard. Yoon Jae-hyuk's internal whistleblower documents and Lee Seo-yeon's tearful testimony were now powerful weapons to strangle Choi Min-hyuk. But Hana was not in a hurry. She was an experienced hunter who knew how to wait until her prey was exhausted. Before delivering the final blow, she planned to completely isolate her enemy and cut off all his escape routes. The next target was Session Group's pride and its biggest source of revenue, its reputation. "Your surrogate set is here. Please enjoy your meal." The Hanam-dong penthouse command center became bustling again. Hana's new order was simple but lethal. Find the most sensitive and demanding foreign luxury brand among those in Seishin department store, especially regarding counterfeit issues. Then we will send an anonymous tip to their Asia-Pacific headquarters. Kim Yura looked Hana up and down and let out a disdainful snort. In her eyes was the silent message, just someone who does a job like this. Hana bore the gaze silently and turned to leave. It was then that a piercing scream erupted. The team members immediately understood her intent. To luxury brands, counterfeits were the most serious issue, directly threatening their survival. If the rumor spread that counterfeit goods were being sold at Seishin Department Store, one of South Korea's most prestigious department stores, it would undoubtedly turn into an unstoppable scandal. Oh my God, my brooch, my diamond brooch is gone. Eternel, a French luxury jewelry brand, is the most suitable choice. The information analysis team leader reported, they invest a massive amount every year in counterfeit prevention and are known for their extremely strict distribution channel management. They will conduct an immediate audit from the head office even at the slightest suspicion. Kim Yura cried out, frantically patting the table with her hands. She was pointing at the spot on her Chanel jacket lapel where a magnificent diamond brooch should have been. In an instant, all eyes in the food court turned to their table. Choi Min-hyuk's face hardened. Good. Let's go with Eternel. The tip must be specific and credible. We'll frame it as a conscience declaration from an insider employee, stating that some unethical middle managers are siphoning off authentic items through Seishin's lax inventory management system and replacing them with high-quality counterfeits. Don't forget to subtly drop a few serial numbers of suspicious items and the initials of the relevant individuals. Which one? Her instructions were deviously precise. Whether there were actual counterfeits or not was irrelevant. The important thing was to plant the seed of doubt. Once trust begins to crack, its collapse is only a matter of time. The one you gave me for my birthday, it's a limited edition, the only one in the world. Kim Yura sobbed, clinging to Choi Min-hyuk's arm. The operation was executed immediately. Through Cheonmu Group's overseas branch, an anonymous email was sent to the audit team at Eternel's Asia-Pacific headquarters from an untraceable IP address. The email's content was so specific and factual that Eternel's head office immediately went into emergency mode. Instead of asking their South Korean branch to verify the facts, they decided to dispatch their own audit team directly. His sharp eyes scanned the surroundings. They landed on Hana's back just as she was about to walk away, like a predator spotting its prey. He strode over to her and grabbed her arm roughly. A few days later, on a clear afternoon, Choi Min-hyuk was still struggling with the food supply issue and the growing unrest among his staff. His secretary, his face pale, rushed into the office. You were just at this table, weren't you? Director, we have a big problem. An audit team from Eternel's head office in France just stormed in. Hana's body tensed. She slowly turned to face Choi Min-hyuk. His eyes were a mixture of suspicion, rage, and a cruel delight directed at the vulnerable. What an audit team. It's not even the regular audit season. Why all of a sudden, Choi Min-hyuk jumped up from his seat. Eternel was one of Seishin department store's most important partners. Offending them was unimaginable. He rushed to the first-floor store. In front of the shop, foreign audit team members from the head office were already there, their eyes sharp as they checked the inventory. The store manager was sweating nervously, at a loss for what to do. Yes, sir. I brought your food, Hana replied calmly, her voice devoid of any tremor. But her heart was sinking. A foreboding feeling wrapped around her, sensing the turn the situation was about to take. What's going on? What is this rude behavior without any prior notice? Choi Min-hyuk demanded in English, but the audit team leader didn't bat an eye and replied coldly. You took it, didn't you? You stole my girlfriend's brooch, Choi Min-hyuk shouted without a moment's hesitation. His voice echoed throughout the food court. Whispers rippled through the crowd like waves. Oh my, an employee stole a customer's item. I knew she looked slow. That girl is finished now. The malicious whispers pierced Hana's ears like daggers. You must be Director Choi Min-hyuk. We are an audit team on direct orders from our head office. We have received a serious tip that counterfeit goods are being distributed in your department store. We ask for your full cooperation until the audit is complete. Sir, I didn't steal anything, Hana said calmly but firmly. She tried to pull away from his grip, but his hold was surprisingly strong. The word counterfeit hit Choi Min-hyuk like a hammer to the back of the head. Don't you dare deny it. It's obvious you're desperate for money. People like you can lie without blinking an eye. Don't think I don't know that, Choi Min-hyuk sneered, his eyes raking over her. There was no respect for a fellow human being in his gaze. He was simply enjoying the thrill of flaunting his power and crushing a lowly existence before him. See, counterfeits. That's absurd. This is South Korea's best department store. How could such a thing? The manager rushed over, bowing repeatedly and looking helpless in front of Choi Min-hyuk. Mr. Choi, what is the matter? There must be some misunderstanding. This employee is always very diligent. That's what we're here to confirm. If the tip proves to be true, we will not only immediately pull out of Sishin department store, but also file a massive lawsuit against your company for damages. Misunderstanding. My girlfriend just lost something, and you call that a misunderstanding, and you, a manager, can't even properly manage your staff. Choi Min-hyuk's roar turned the manager's face ghostly white. He couldn't say another word and shut his mouth. All the employees in the food court held their breath, watching the scene unfold. Their eyes held a mixture of pity, resigned helplessness, and a selfish hope that the disaster wouldn't fall on them. The audit team leader's firm words left Choi Min-hyuk speechless. Cold sweat streamed down his body. If Eternal were to leave, the ripple effect would be unimaginable. Other luxury brands would likely follow suit, and Sishin department store would instantly be relegated to a third-rate department store that sells fakes. Choi Min-hyuk's gaze returned to Hana. A cruel smile played on his lips. He was determined to enjoy the situation to the fullest. More than just catching a thief, he wanted to make an example of her in front of all the employees. To cement his absolute power, news of Eternal's surprise audit spread like wildfire in the industry. While the media remained cautious, stock market rumors were already buzzing with related news. Sishin department store, suspected of distributing luxury counterfeits. Possibility of luxury brands withdrawing one after another. The sensational rumors spread at a terrifying speed through Kakao Talk and social media. All right, since you're so adamant about your innocence, I'll give you a chance to prove it. Let's do a body search right here. Prove your innocence in front of everyone. Choi Min-hyuk fell into a state of panic. He was convinced that this was also the work of his rival, Taepyeong department store. After cutting off their food supply to cripple the food court, they were now trying to tarnish the department store's reputation with vile rumors. The word body search froze the air. It was a humiliating act, no different from stripping a person bare in a public place. Even Kim Yoo-ra's eyes widened as she looked at Choi Min-hyuk. She hadn't expected things to escalate this far. But Choi Min-hyuk's eyes were already glazed with madness. Taepyeong! Those bastards! I won't let you get away with this! He raged like a madman in his office. He ordered the mobilization of all of Session Group's intelligence to dig up dirt on Taepyeong and launch a counterattack. But his vision was too narrow. Obsessed with his colossal rival, he was completely oblivious to the real threat quietly growing beneath his feet. He couldn't even begin to imagine that the female employee he had once treated like a bug, whose name he couldn't even remember, was the invisible hand orchestrating all of this. Check her pockets first, Choi Min-hyuk gestured to a security guard. But he wasn't satisfied. He wanted to inflict a more profound humiliation. Kang Hana received real-time updates of the situation from her penthouse. Seeing Choi Min-hyuk flustered and enraged on the monitor screens gave her no satisfaction. Her plan was proceeding without a single error. No, wait. You might not find anything that way. Who knows, she could have hidden it inside her clothes. His gaze lingered on Hana's uniform vest. Hey, take off that vest. And your shirt, too. Show everyone that you haven't hidden anything, and I'll believe you. As expected, Choi Min-hyuk has blamed Taepyeong department store and is focusing all his resources on them. Thanks to that, he hasn't noticed our moves at all. Chief Park reported. It was a command, a malevolent demand designed to trample on a person's last shred of dignity. Gasps of shock erupted from the crowd. A few female customers turned away, their faces flushed. The manager's face was ashen, and he tried to intervene, but Choi Min-hyuk's menacing glare stopped him from speaking. Hana nodded. That's good. While the enemy is distracted, we must quietly delve deeper into his core. All eyes were on Hana. She stood alone in the eye of a great storm. People expected her to beg for forgiveness or overcome with shame to comply with his demands. But Hana's reaction was completely unexpected. The eternal audit continued for several days. In the end, no counterfeits were found, but the damage had already been done. Where there's smoke, There's fire! Once the suspicion was planted, it didn't easily fade. An indelible stain had been left on Seishin department store's reputation, and other luxury brands began to hesitate on renewing their contracts. While Choi Min-hyuk felt a sense of relief that no counterfeits were found, he was also on the verge of losing his mind from the fear and rage of this invisible attack. He spent a fortune on advertisements proclaiming, "Seishin department store is safe," but it was not enough to win back the public's trust. All emotion vanished from her face. Her usual faint and unassuming expression was gone, replaced by something as cold and sharp as ice. She didn't even look at the hand holding her arm. Instead, she met Choi Min-hyuk's gaze directly. It was no longer the submissive look of a service employee. It was a deep, chilling abyss, as if it could see through him and measure the very weight of his soul. He was sinking deeper into the mire. He began to suspect everyone around him and acted like a tyrant, flying into a rage at the smallest mistake. There was no one left around him to give honest counsel. Everyone was just busy submitting false reports to please him. Choi Min-hyuk instinctively faltered. The woman in front of him suddenly felt like a different person. The overwhelming pressure almost made him release his grip on her arm. Hana watched him walk his own path to ruin. The invisible net she had woven was tightening around Choi Min-hyuk's neck. She had shaken his business foundation by halting the food supply and tainted his reputation with the counterfeit scandal. Now, all that remained was the final move to take everything away from him and expose the definitive evidence that would put him on trial. Hana opened her mouth quietly. Her voice was low but carried enough weight to dominate the entire chaotic food court. "Chief Park, I think the time has come," Hana said, standing up and looking out the window. The sky over Seoul was calm, like the calm before a storm. "No. Announce a large-scale investment plan for the future of the retail industry under the name of Cheonmu Group. And we will hold a celebratory party. Invite all the key figures in the industry. Of course, Chairman Choi and Director Choi Min-hyuk of Seishin Group must also attend." Just one word, but within it was the unbending will of steel. People held their breath. How dare she say no to the Prince of Seishin department store? A cold smile appeared on her lips. The time had come to shed her mask. The moment Choi Min-hyuk would realize who his real enemy was and fall from the highest place in the world to the most miserable depths was imminent. Choi Min-hyuk was momentarily flustered, but his face quickly contorted with rage. He had lost his temper at the fact that a mere employee had dared to defy his command. A few days later, all eyes in South Korea's business world were on one place. Cheonmu Group, the country's #1 company, was announcing a massive investment plan for the retail industry with a celebratory party. The venue was the Grand Ballroom of the Heaven, a 6-star hotel owned by the Cheonmu Group. The guest list included titans of politics and business, and all the key players in the retail industry. The invitation itself was a symbol of power and honor. What did you just say, you crazy bitch? Who do you think you're talking to?" An invitation also arrived for Seishin Group's chairman Choi and director Choi Min-hyuk, whose prestige had plummeted due to a series of recent setbacks. Chairman Choi thought this was a great opportunity to show that they were still standing and to send a warning to their rivals, including Taepyeong department store. Just as he reached out to grab her hair, Hana took another step closer to him. She whispered in a voice so low only he could hear, a voice colder than the winter wind. "Min-hyuk, stay alert. This party isn't just a social event. Cheonmu Group might be looking for a new partner. You have to somehow get noticed by Chairman Kang. You will regret this." Choi Min-hyuk reluctantly nodded at his father's words. He was still plagued by rage and anxiety about the unseen enemy, but he couldn't miss a party hosted by the Cheonmu Group. He put on his finest custom-made suit and headed to the party, forcing a relaxed smile. The food court at Seishin department store was more than just a place to eat. It was a microcosm of another high society, a stage where wealth and status competed in a subtle, silent battle. The marble floor gleamed without a speck of dust, and from the ceiling, a crystal chandelier crafted by a renowned designer scattered a soft, ethereal light. The air was a rich mix of expensive perfume, freshly brewed coffee, and the savory aromas of gourmet dishes from around the world. The customers who frequented this place were all impeccably dressed, their relaxed gestures and conversations exuding the self-assurance of those who belonged to the upper echelons. The party was a true feast of wealth and power. Underneath a gigantic chandelier, the people who moved South Korea clinked champagne glasses and exchanged pleasantries. Choi Min-hyuk approached people he knew, greeting them and forcing a laugh, but their eyes seemed to be colder than usual. Rumors about the food supply crisis and the counterfeit scandal had already spread far and wide. He could hear whispers behind his back. It was not a simple threat. It was a chilling warning that revealed only the tip of a giant iceberg. A declaration that foretold an inevitable downfall. Deep within Hana's eyes, the predator that had been dormant for so long was slowly awakening. The quiet storm had finally opened its eyes. Isn't that Director Choi of Session? I hear he's been failing lately? Yeah, that's the scariest thing about owner risk. Hana's warning dissipated into the cold air. Choi Min-hyuk did not grasp the weight of her words. He was simply consumed by a sense of humiliation and had lost all reason. How could a lowly part-time worker dare to threaten him? But before he could unleash another torrent of abuse, Hana had already turned away. Her movements showed not a single moment of hesitation or regret. Choi Min-hyuk clenched his fists. When he saw the chairman of Taepyeong department store laughing with other business leaders, his hatred boiled over. She walked through the dozens of eyes fixed on her. Disdain, pity, curiosity, and even a hint of awe. All these emotions, mixed together, struck her back like daggers. Choi Min-hyuk's curse-like shouts echoed behind her. As the party ripened, all the lights in the hall went out, and a spotlight shone on the stage. The host took the microphone and announced in a booming voice, "Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce the person who will grace this event and lead the future of Cheomu Group. Please give a big round of applause for Vice President Kang Hana. Fire that crazy bitch immediately. No, make sure she can never work in this industry again. I'll show her exactly who I am." The name Kang Hana caused a stir. There had been rumors that Chairman Kang of Cheonmu Group had a granddaughter who had been living a life of secrecy. But this was the first time she was officially making an appearance. Everyone's eyes turned to the stage entrance. Choi Min-hyuk also looked that way. What a grand entrance for a princess, he thought, sneering to himself. The manager was on the verge of tears, trying to calm him down, and her colleagues bowed their heads, not daring to meet her gaze. None of them stepped up for her. They couldn't. They had livelihoods to protect, and Choi Min-hyuk was the king who held the power of life and death over them. Hana didn't resent them. This was the raw reality of the world she had wanted to see and experience for herself. She saw how easily justice for the powerless was trampled, and how the silence of the majority enabled evil. And then she appeared. She walked to the employees' locker room as if nothing had happened, her steps calm and composed. As soon as she closed the door, the noise of the outside world was cut off. The narrow, stuffy space was filled with the smell of old lockers, sweat, and cheap air freshener, a world completely different from the glamorous food court she had just left. Suddenly, all the noise in the party hall ceased, and absolute silence, as if time itself had stopped, descended. The champagne glass in Choi Min-hyuk's hand fell and shattered on the floor. His eyes were fixed on the unbelievable sight. His mouth hung open, and the blood in his body felt like it was turning to ice. Hana slowly took off her uniform vest and unbuttoned her shirt. Her body was unharmed, but an indelible wound was seared deep into her soul. It was not anger, but a cold determination. She stood in front of the mirror. A stranger stared back at her. No longer was she a naive young woman ignorant of the world, or a quiet, diligent part-timer. Her eyes were now those of a lioness that had found its prey cold and resolute. The woman walking onto the stage was the lowly part-timer, who had worked at his department store food court just a few weeks ago. She changed into an old pair of jeans and a t-shirt from her locker. She then picked up her small bag, which contained almost no personal belongings, only an old wallet and a simple smartphone. She took out the phone. It was an ordinary model she used to minimize contact with the outside world, but it held only one number, the last link she had clung to during her isolated life. But she was no longer in a worn-out uniform. Her simple yet elegant black silk dress perfectly accentuated her figure, and a diamond necklace worth billions sparkled around her neck like a star. Her hair, which used to be tied back, now fell in natural waves over her shoulders, and her bare face was now graced with subtle makeup, exuding the grace of a queen. She pressed the call button. The line rang just once. What had changed the most, however, was her gaze. It was no longer submissive or faint. It was full of a charisma that commanded the room and a cold intelligence that seemed to see through everything. She was Kang Hana, the sole heiress to the Cheonmu Group. "Miss, The crowd gasped in a mix of shock and admiration. It was the most shocking debut in the history of South Korea's business world. A deep, calm voice came from the receiver. It was Chief Park Jin-soo, the chief secretary of the Cheonmu Group and a man who had dedicated his life to the Kong family. There was no question or surprise in his voice. He sounded as if he had been waiting for this moment all along. Choi Min-hyuk couldn't breathe. His mind went blank. The puzzle pieces began to fit together in a frenzied rush. The sudden termination of the food supplier's contract, the meticulously planned counterfeit rumor, and the clever traces that had made him believe Taepyeong department store was behind it all. It had all been orchestrated by this woman right in front of him. The woman he had trampled like a bug was the owner of a giant empire that moved South Korea. "It's me, Chief Park. I think it's time for me to go back." Hana's voice was dry. "You will regret this." "Understood. Please come to the employee parking lot at the back of the department store in 5 minutes. I'll be there to pick you up." The chilling warning she had whispered to him that day echoed in his ears. It wasn't a simple threat. It was a prophecy of his ruin. "Yes." Hana stood on the podium and eloquently presented Cheonmu Group's future vision in both English and Chinese. Her voice was calm but powerful, and her insights impressed everyone. When her presentation ended, a thunderous round of applause erupted. The call ended there. No unnecessary words were exchanged. An absolute trust built over many years existed between the two of them. Hana put her smartphone back in her bag and left the locker room. The colleagues she passed in the hallway avoided her as if she were a ghost. She paid them no mind and walked down the employee-only corridor. After navigating the dark, damp, maze-like hallways, she finally felt the familiar air of the outside world. The party resumed, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Everyone flocked to the new heiress to greet her. Choi Min-hyuk and his father were abandoned like a deserted island, with no one even glancing their way. In stark contrast to the store's glamorous front, the back entrance was a grimy area filled with piles of trash and food waste bins. Exactly 5 minutes after she arrived, a black Maybach glided silently to a stop in front of her. Its overwhelming presence stood in stark contrast to the old delivery trucks parked nearby. Chairman Choi's face had turned ashen. He shot a murderous look at his son. "You! What the hell have you been doing?" Chief Park got out of the driver's seat, impeccably dressed in a black suit. He quickly walked to the back door, opened it with a respectful gesture, and bowed deeply to Hana. Choi Min-hyuk couldn't answer. He just stared at Hana, completely out of his mind. "I've kept you waiting, miss." Finally, she moved. She pushed through the crowd and walked directly toward them. Everyone's gaze followed her every step, like an executioner approaching a condemned man. She stood in front of Choi Min-hyuk with a cold, expressionless face. If any department store employees had witnessed this scene, they might have fainted. The chief secretary of South Korea's top conglomerate bowing so respectfully to a part-time worker in old clothes. It was a surreal sight that defied all reality. She stared at him intently. Under her gaze, Choi Min-hyuk felt himself to be endlessly small and pathetic. Hana got into the car without a word. As she sank into the plush leather seat, the tension finally began to release. The moment the car door closed, the stench and noise of the outside world were completely sealed off. The car was silent, filled only with the faint scent of leather. It was the moment Hana's mask was completely shed. Hana spoke quietly. Her voice was not loud, but it had enough weight to silence all the surrounding noise. She repeated the exact words he had said to her in the food court that day. "I've grasped the situation," Chief Park said, his eyes meeting hers in the rearview mirror. His voice was still calm, but a sharp anger was simmering beneath. "He is Director Choi Min-hyuk, the son of the Session Department Store chairman. His reputation within the group is atrocious. He's notoriously arrogant, incompetent, and known for bullying the weak with his status. It's obvious you're desperate for money. People like you can lie without blinking an eye. Don't think I don't know that. Get me all the relevant data immediately. His personal corruption, Session Group's financial status, tax evasion or illegal fund flows, shareholder composition, and relationships with business partners. Leave no stone unturned, not even the smallest detail." Hana's voice was as cold as ice. It was no longer the voice of a submissive employee, but the firm and ruthless command of the heiress who would lead a great empire. A gasp of shock erupted from the crowd. "And convene the information analysis and legal teams. Come to my penthouse at once. We are going to war." "All right. Since you're so adamant about your innocence, I'll give you a chance to prove it." Let's do a body search right here. Prove your innocence in front of everyone. Understood, miss. All color drained from Choi Min-hyuk's face. He tried to stumble backward in fear, but his feet felt stuck to the floor. The Maybach sped through Seoul's traffic, seemingly mocking the congestion. The car entered the underground parking lot of La Terra, a luxurious apartment complex on the highest hill in Hanam-dong. Breaking through the strict security, the private elevator stopped at the top floor. Hana took another step closer, and just like her final warning that day, she whispered to his ear in a cold voice, "Wasn't I right that you would regret this?" As the door opened, Hana's true world was revealed. The enormous penthouse, with its floor-to-ceiling windows, offered a panoramic view of Seoul. The interior was like a massive command center, filled with the latest technology. Dozens of monitors lined the walls, and the Cheonmu Group's core executives were already there, waiting for her. As Hana entered, they all stood up and bowed 90 degrees in unison. At that moment, Choi Min-hyuk realized this was not the end. This was just the beginning of hell. His arrogant castle was beginning to crumble into pieces under the force of a great storm right before his very eyes. "Miss, you've arrived!" Hana's final whisper echoed through the party hall along with the sound of Choi Min-hyuk's world collapsing. The grand ballroom instantly turned into chaos. People watched this unprecedented drama with expressions of shock, astonishment, and satisfaction. Choi Min-hyuk froze in a daze, and his father, Chairman Choi, with a pale face, grabbed his son's arm. Hana nodded in lieu of a greeting. Dressed in her old jeans and t-shirt, she sat at the head of the conference table. Her very presence caused the air in the room to tighten. "Let's go. We have to get out of here right now." From this moment on, we will begin a full-scale analysis of Sishin Group. The goal is simple: to dismantle the arrogant castle built by Choi Min-hyuk and his father, within the bounds of the law, but without mercy. A wave of tension filled everyone's face at her declaration. Chairman Choi felt the decades of reputation and prestige he had built in the business world turn to ashes in an instant. He tried to pull his son and leave the party hall. A barrage of camera flashes and mocking whispers, sharp as daggers, followed them. Meanwhile, at the same hour, Choi Min-hyuk was popping champagne with Kim Yoo-ra at a high-end bar in Cheongdam-dong. He was bragging about what had just happened as if it were an heroic tale. But that was only the beginning of the storm. Before they could even get out of the hotel's luxurious lobby, everyone's smartphones in the party hall buzzed simultaneously, as if on cue. It was the sharp alert sound of breaking news. "Did you see? That's what happens to anyone who dares to cross me. That bitch is probably crying on the streets right now. Huh, she got what she deserved." Breaking news: Sishin Group, suspected of creating hundreds of billions of won in slush funds and tax evasion. Prosecution to launch full-scale investigation. Kim Yoo-ra fawned over him, clinging to his arm. "Oh, Min-hyuk, you're so cool. We should show those bug-like people their place from the start. Oh, right. I still haven't found my brooch. What should I do?" The first wave had begun. "Don't worry. I'll buy you a better, more expensive one tomorrow. I can't let something so insignificant ruin your mood." The main pages of all major South Korean news outlets were covered with articles about Sishin Group. News channels that were airing their regular programs interrupted them to switch to an emergency broadcast. Choi Min-hyuk downed his champagne in one gulp. He had completely forgotten the woman he had crushed like a bug, the last look in her eyes and her chilling warning. He had no idea that the person he had provoked was not a mere part-timer, but a sleeping lion from a giant empire that moved all of South Korea. The nightlights of Seoul glittered under their laughter, but behind the dazzling lights, a great storm was quietly beginning to swirl. And the eye of that storm was aimed directly at Choi Min-hyuk. "We have just received news. Sishin Group, one of South Korea's leading retail conglomerates, is facing the biggest crisis since its founding. The prosecution has uncovered evidence that Sishin Group created hundreds of billions of won in slush funds through shell companies and engaged in systematic tax evasion." The first crack in Session Department Store's glass castle began to appear. The sudden halt in food supply was more than a simple operational hitch. It was a precursor that shook the very foundation of Choi Min-hyuk's arrogant world. For the first few days, he dismissed it as a minor inconvenience, secure in his belief that money could solve anything. But time was not on his side. Chairman Choi's phone began to ring nonstop. It was his executives and legal team making frantic calls. But he couldn't answer. His hands were trembling, paralyzed by fear. Despite his furious demands to find a replacement, it was nearly impossible to secure organic ingredients of the same quality as those supplied by Monofoods. The purchasing team searched the entire country, but their efforts were met with failure after failure. The food court's reputation plummeted daily, and VIP customers stopped coming altogether. The drop in sales was clearly visible in the numbers. An even more shocking headline appeared on Choi Min-hyuk's phone screen. Choi Min-hyuk's office had become the eye of a hurricane. Expensive Italian furniture was bruised by his rage, and employees saw a summons from him as a death sentence. Exclusive. Session Group's Prince Choi Min-hyuk, suspected of abuse of power and technology theft against an emerging designer. Victim to hold a tearful press conference. So you still haven't fixed it. What do you people even do for a living while getting paid a salary, you incompetent fools? His shouts pierced the soundproof walls and echoed down the hallway. Executives bowed their heads, waiting for his rage to pass. They were now afraid to report to Choi Min-hyuk. No matter what solution they proposed, all they received in return was blame and humiliation. The organization became rigid, and a passive atmosphere, where no one wanted to take responsibility, began to prevail. In-depth report. Enraged victims. Exposé Director Choi Min-hyuk's habitual verbal abuse and sexual harassment. Whistleblower reports pour in. Choi Min-hyuk was convinced that this was the doing of their rival, Taepyeong Department Store. He mobilized his entire intelligence network to dig into Taepyeong, but found nothing. The enemy was invisible, slowly strangling him. The fear of this unseen foe gradually began to paralyze his reason. He reacted to minor issues with irrational irritability, and his mistrust of the staff reached a fever pitch. The second wave crashed over them relentlessly. They're all spies. There's someone around me who's leaking information to Taepyeong. Find them all out. Now. His paranoid suspicions created unnecessary conflict and animosity within the organization. Even his loyal staff began to turn their backs on him. Choi Min-hyuk was, from the inside, tearing down his own castle walls. All the bombs prepared by Hannah's command center had exploded at precisely calculated times. All at once, his father, Chairman Choi, could no longer ignore the situation. A self-made man, he had always been displeased with his son's arrogance, but had always shielded him as the only heir. This crisis, however, pushed his patience to the limit. In her Hanam-dong penthouse, Hana watched the great wave she had set in motion through the wall of monitors. Next to her, Chief Park, the legal team, and the information analysis team were working in perfect coordination. Min-hyuk, what are you doing? You can't even solve a simple food supply problem, and you've turned the entire department store into this mess. His father's cold voice on the phone made Choi Min-hyuk tremble. Miss, we have successfully distributed the first press release to all media outlets as planned. Currently, the top 10 real-time search terms on all major portals are all related to Session Group. Dad, this isn't a simple problem. The Taepyeong guys are attacking us on purpose. I'll definitely find out who's behind this. What's the prosecution's reaction? Behind what? How many enemies have you made that something like this is happening? If you don't resolve this before this week's shareholders meeting, be prepared to step down as director. The Special Investigation Division of the Supreme Prosecutor's Office has immediately formed a special investigation team. A search and seizure warrant for Session Group's headquarters and Chairman Choi's home is expected to be issued tonight. The evidence provided by former director Yoon Jae-hyuk was decisive. The evidence was so clear that the prosecution had no choice but to act. Chairman Choi hung up without another word. Choi Min-hyuk, in a daze, put down the receiver. The fact that he had lost his father's trust was a humiliation he could not bear. His eyes became bloodshot. The arrow of his rage was once again aimed at his helpless subordinates. He summoned his secretary and threw documents at him, screaming. His cruel nature was now ugly, leaking through the cracks in the glass castle. At that very moment, under the protection of Cheomu Group's legal team, designer Lee Seo-yeon appeared at a press conference, in front of countless camera flashes. She, in a trembling voice, began to expose the pain she had endured for the past few years and Choi Min-hyuk's heinous acts, one by one. Her tears were not just a person's sadness. They were the vengeful cries of all the powerless whose dreams had been trampled by a great power. The press conference room became solemn, and her courageous confession, broadcast live on the internet, sparked national outrage. At the same time, In the command center of the Hanam-dong penthouse, Kang Hana calmly observed Choi Min-hyuk's self-destruction. The monitors on the wall showed a live feed of the chaos within Session Group. As soon as Lee Seo-yeon's press conference ended, anonymous interviews from other victims began to pour in. Former drivers who had been habitually verbally abused and humiliated by Choi Min-hyuk, and female employees who had to quit because they couldn't endure the sexual harassment. Their testimonies clearly proved that Choi Min-hyuk was not a spoiled heir, but a monster with a destroyed personality. Choi Min-hyuk is collapsing on his own. The collapse has begun from within, without us having to lift a finger, Chief Park reported. The world was turned upside down. Public opinion worsened uncontrollably. A voluntary boycott of Station Group began to spread through online communities, and civic groups held protests in front of Station department store. But Hana's expression remained indifferent. This is just the beginning. A man like that becomes even more cruel when cornered. We need a more powerful card. A definitive piece of evidence that can strike at the heart of Station Group. Something no one can deny. Chairman Choi and Choi Min-hyuk, who had managed to get into their car in the hotel parking lot, were in a state of complete panic. Chairman Choi watched in despair as his empire, built over a lifetime, collapsed in an instant. He began to mobilize all his connections. Powerful figures in politics, high-ranking officials in the prosecution, and media owners. He called the people he had managed for decades to ask for help. She opened another file brought by the Information Analysis Team leader. The file was titled Yoon Jae-hyuk, former Session Group CFO. Oh, hey, Congressman Kim, it's Chairman Choi. You have to stop this right now. Director Yoon Jae-hyuk. Tell me more about him. But the answers he received were cold. Chairman Choi, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do about this one. The opponent is Cheonmu Group. If we get involved, we'll get hurt too. The team leader displayed Yoon Jae-hyuk's profile on the screen. The man in the photo, in his early 50s, had a firm and upright look. Everyone turned their backs on him. The loyalty they had shown was not to Chairman Choi personally, but to the power he possessed. And now, that power was flickering like a candle in a great storm called Cheonmu Group. No one wanted to go down with a sinking ship. Former director Yoon Jae-hyuk was a leading financial expert in the industry. He was known for his principles and was highly trusted by Chairman Choi. But 2 years ago, he suddenly resigned. The official reason was health issues. But our intelligence indicates that the conflict with director Choi Min-hyuk was the decisive factor. Next to him, Choi Min-hyuk was screaming like a madman. What was the conflict about? Kang Hana? That crazy bitch. How dare she? Dad, kill that bitch right now. We can do anything with our money. It was related to an overseas resort development project director Choi Min-hyuk was pushing. Choi Min-hyuk tried to inflate the project funds to create a slush fund, and director Yoon Jae-hyuk strongly opposed it. His stance was that he could not be complicit in fraudulent accounting and breach of trust. In the end, Choi Min-hyuk used his power to forcibly remove Director Yoon and demote all of his close associates. Since then, Director Yoon has left the industry and has been quietly running a small accounting firm. Shut up! For the first time, Chairman Choi raised his hand to his son. Slap! The sharp sound echoed as Choi Min-hyuk's head turned. Hana's eyes lit up. This was exactly the person she had been looking for. An honest whistleblower who had witnessed Choi Min-hyuk's corruption firsthand and had stood up against his unjust demands. This is all because of you. You foolish, arrogant brat, because you provoked one girl. You are destroying everything I have dedicated my entire life to. Chairman Choi's eyes welled up with tears. Rage, despair, and belated regret consumed him. Do you think he has specific evidence of Choi Min-hyuk's slush fund creation? When they arrived at their luxurious home in Songbuk-dong, the front of the house was already an ocean of dozens of reporters and protesters. They were unable to get out of their car, unable to enter their own castle. The probability is very high. He is a meticulous and careful person. So there's a good chance he has backed up all the materials personally. However, it won't be easy to persuade him. He fears retaliation from Choi Min-hyuk and prioritizes protecting his family, his wife and daughter, who is currently in high school. Just then, dozens of black sedans arrived with sirens blaring. The people who got out were special prosecutors and investigators from the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office. They approached Chairman Choi's car with grim expressions and knocked on the window. His family, his strongest conviction and his weakest link, Then, this is the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office. We're here to execute a search and seizure warrant. Please open the door. Hana pondered for a moment. Money or honor would not sway him. He needed something more fundamental, the certainty that justice could be served, an absolute trust that his family would be perfectly protected. At the same time, breaking news flashed on TV screens that another investigation team had entered Session Group's headquarters in Gangnam. Security guards who had tried to resist in the lobby were quickly subdued, and investigators raided key departments, including Director Choi Min-hyuk's office. Chief Park, you meet with former director Yoon Jae-hyuk yourself. Do not reveal our identities. Approach him as a representative of a civilian group trying to expose Session Group's corruption. Offer him a substantial reward in exchange for the evidence, and assure him that his family's safety will be guaranteed. Choi Min-hyuk stared blankly at the scene outside the car window. Prosecutors, reporters, and the angry crowd pointing fingers at him. Everything felt like a surreal nightmare. He was only now realizing what an enormous power he had provoked and how terrible the price was. Understood, miss. The great wave that Kang Hana had set in motion was mercilessly swallowing everything. The arrogant castle of money and power he had been so proud of, a place called Session, was now no more than a sandcastle crumbling helplessly in the face of a great wave. The gates of hell had swung wide open. A few days later, Chief Park, after some searching, found the small accounting firm Yoon Jae-hyuk was running. The office was in a shabby old commercial building on the outskirts of Seoul. It was a far cry from the glamorous CFO's office at Session Group. Beginning with the prosecution's raid, the great tower known as Session Group began to collapse like a sandcastle. The speed of the collapse was unimaginably fast and merciless. The operation that Kang Hana had meticulously designed for months beneath the surface, once it came to light, became a tsunami with unstoppable destructive power, swallowing everything in its path. Chief Park met Yoon Jae-hyuk at the appointed time. Yoon Jae-hyuk greeted the unexpected visitor with a wary look. The Special Investigation Division of the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office, through an all-night search and seizure, secured dozens of boxes of accounting ledgers and computer hard drives from the home of Chairman Choi and his son, and the group's headquarters. When compared with the decisive evidence provided by former director Yoon Jae-hyuk, their criminal charges snowballed. Hundreds of billions of won in fraudulent accounting, corporate tax evasion, creation of slush funds and hidden assets using overseas shell companies, and evidence of lobbying politicians and officials. The corrupt reality of a South Korean cable was fully exposed. What brings you here? As soon as the stock market opened the next day, Session Group's stock hit its lowest possible price. A flood of sell orders poured in, but no one wanted to buy. More than 80% of its market capitalization evaporated in just a few days. It was the moment the wealth that had been built over a lifetime disappeared into thin air. Business partners, fearing they would not be paid, announced a halt to transactions, and banks refused to extend loans that were due, putting the group under severe financial pressure. The group was plunged into a liquidity crisis and was on the verge of bankruptcy. As prepared, Chief Park introduced himself and cautiously got to the point. Director Yoon, we have heard about the injustices you suffered in the past. We want to expose the corruption of Director Choi Min-hyuk and Session Group to the world. We desperately need your help. Chairman Choi and Choi Min-hyuk were summoned by the prosecution and underwent an all-night investigation. The father and son, who had once dominated South Korea's business world, now stood on the photo line as pitiful suspects. In front of countless camera flashes, Chairman Choi bowed his head and repeated a cliché, "I am sorry for causing concern to the public. I will cooperate with the prosecution's investigation." On the other hand, Choi Min-hyuk, still unable to accept reality, glared at the cameras with eyes full of rage and hatred. His arrogant demeanor only fueled the national outrage. At his words, Yoon Jae-hyuk's face turned to stone. He stood up abruptly and pointed to the door. Inside the interrogation room, the ugly truth of the father and son was exposed even more. They began to shift the blame to each other. "Please leave. I have nothing to say. I don't know who you are, but I no longer want to be involved with them." His voice was firm, but a deep fear was etched in it. It was as if the nightmare of 2 years ago was coming back to life. "I didn't know anything about it. It was all that boy, my son, who acted on his own. I have been retired from the front line of management for a long time." Chairman Choi struggled to reduce his charges by selling out his son. Choi Min-hyuk also fought back. "Director, We can guarantee your and your family's safety. And you told me to, prosecutor, that all of this would have been impossible without my father's orders. Guarantee. How can you guarantee anything? Do you even know what kind of person Choi Min-hyuk is? He is a man who will do anything for money and power. I have no intention of doing anything reckless that would endanger my family. Get out, now. The father-son relationship, which had once seemed solid, degenerated into a fight between two animals biting each other in front of the law. Their pathetic state was enough to make even the prosecutors in charge of the case shake their heads. Faced with Yoon Jae-hyuk's unyielding refusal, Chief Park had no choice but to back down. In the end, the prosecution requested a warrant for the arrest of the father and son, citing a risk of evidence tampering and flight, and the court immediately granted it. Their appearance dressed in cold prison uniforms instead of their luxurious suits. Heading to the detention center was broadcast live on all news channels. The arrogant tower they had built, which once seemed to conquer the world, had completely and miserably collapsed. When Hana received the report, she remained composed, as if she had expected this. I thought so. He needs time, and we need to make him realize that we are not just a simple threat, but the only lifeline he can trust and rely on. Hana watched this entire process quietly from her penthouse. She saw the father and son crumbling while blaming each other on the monitors, but she felt no sense of satisfaction or joy. Instead, a heavy sense of responsibility settled in, along with a cool satisfaction of seeing the world's disrupted order returning to its rightful place. She gave a new order. Direct contact with Yoon Jae-hyuk was to be suspended for the time being, but they were to make sure he kept a close eye on Session Group's situation. Hana began to subtly leak Session's crisis to the media. Articles about unidentified supply chain disruptions, a sharp drop in customer satisfaction, and lack of leadership among management began to appear. They were not sensational, but anyone with insider knowledge would feel their gravity. Miss, everything is proceeding as planned. Session Group is in a state of irreversible decline and is expected to go into court receivership soon, Chief Park reported. Every morning, Yoon Jae-hyuk read the news and saw reports about Session Group. He instinctively knew that the ongoing situation was no mere accident. Someone was meticulously attacking Session from an unseen place. The face of Chief Park, who had visited him a few days ago, came to his mind. As show how our former director Yoon Jae-hyuk and designer Lee Seo-yeon doing, Hana asked. Her concern had already moved from the punishment of the perpetrators to the recovery of the victims. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat alone on the living room sofa, tormented in the darkness. His heart ached at the reality that the injustice and corruption he had turned a blind eye to were now eating away at the company. Just then, his daughter quietly came into the living room. They are staying in a safe house we prepared, receiving psychological counseling and resting. In particular, Director Yoon seems to have found some peace, as if he has finally shed the guilt he's carried for a long time. Ms. Lee Seo-yeon has started to hold her sketchbook again. It's still difficult, but she's making an effort to reclaim her dream. Dad, you're still awake. Is something bothering you? At his words, a faint smile appeared on Hana's lips for the first time. That was the outcome she truly wanted. Just then, a message arrived on his phone from an unknown number. The message was short. What you sought to protect has crumbled. Everything is falling apart where your principles were abandoned. Session Group's downfall had a huge impact on the industry, but the vacant space didn't remain empty for long. Under the name of Cheonmu Group, Hana acquired Session Group's prime assets and began a large-scale restructuring. Her first order was a humanitarian purge. All executives and employees who had condoned or stood by Choi Min-hyuk's evil deeds were fired without exception. In particular, the manager who, that day in the food court, had not only failed to stop Choi Min-hyuk's abuses, but had even blamed her, was the first to receive his termination notice. Below the text was an encrypted file. With trembling hands, Yoon Jae-hyuk opened it. Inside was a part of a secret ledger containing the fraudulent accounting Choi Min-hyuk had forced him to participate in 2 years ago. It was a decisive piece of evidence that only he and Choi Min-hyuk would know about. The empty positions were filled with new talents who possessed both ability and integrity. Hana brought back competent employees who had been unjustly demoted under Choi Min-hyuk's reign at Session Group. She offered former director Yoon Jae-hyuk the important role of chief auditor of the newly launched Cheonmu Retail. He initially hesitated, but Hana's sincere persuasion We need someone like you to keep things in check so that a tragedy like Sessions can never happen again, finally convinced him to accept the offer. Goosebumps covered Yoon Jae-hyuk's body. The other party knew exactly what he possessed and what was tormenting his heart. This was no ordinary civilian group. This was an organization with a power that surpassed Session Group. Lee Seo-yeon's Luna Soul was resurrected with Chonmu Group's full support. Chonmu provided her with the best design and marketing teams and opened her first flagship store in the prime location where Session Department Store had once stood. On her comeback stage, Lee Seo-yeon received critical acclaim for her designs, which were more mature and profound than before. She was no longer a fragile artist victimized by a great power. She had been reborn as a strong and independent designer who had transformed her wounds into art. He read the last sentence that came with the file: "Justice is powerless alone, but together, we can change the world. The choice is yours." Director, time passed, and the day of the first trial verdict for Choi Min-hyuk and Chairman Choi finally arrived. The courtroom was packed with reporters and spectators. Choi Min-hyuk, sitting in the defendant's chair, looked haggard, as if he had aged decades in just a few months. The arrogance of the past was nowhere to be seen, replaced by anxiety and fear as he stared at the judge's mouth. Yoon Jae-hyuk stood still, holding his phone. A door in his heart, which had been firmly closed for a long time, was now creaking open, little by little. The most solid wall of the glass castle was finally cracking from within. The judge read out the verdict in a solemn voice. The defendant, Choi Dong-soo, Chairman Choi, is found guilty of embezzlement, breach of trust, and tax evasion. He is sentenced to 15 years in prison. A storm raged in Yoon Jae-hyuk's heart for days. The fear of a father worrying about his family's safety clashed fiercely with the last ounce of pride of an accountant fighting for trampled justice. The anonymous message and encrypted file he had received were not just pieces of information. They were a sharp dagger pointed at his conscience, a solemn command to face his past self. He couldn't sleep all night, pacing the living room. As dawn broke, he finally made his decision. If he remained silent, he would never be able to forgive himself, nor would he be able to look his beloved daughter in the eye with pride. Then, everyone's eyes turned to Choi Min-hyuk. The next morning, Yoon Jae-hyuk called the number on the business card Chief Park had given him a few days ago. His voice was hoarse, but it held a new, solid resolve. The defendant, Choi Min-hyuk, is found guilty of all charges, including habitual business embezzlement, breach of trust, violation of the Act on the Aggravated Punishment of Specific Economic Crimes, coercion, obstruction of business, and defamation. In particular, the defendant, using his superior status, brutally trampled on the dignity and humanity of the socially weak, showing no signs of remorse. To demonstrate the severity of the law and to ensure that such power-based crimes never take root in this country again. The defendant, Choi Min-hyuk, is sentenced to 30 years in prison. This is Yoon Jae-hyuk. I'd like to meet with you again. 30 years in prison. The meeting was arranged quickly, this time not in his shabby office, but in a hotel suite with strict security. Yoon Jae-hyuk presented everything he had. The USB containing the original files of the slush fund ledger he had been forced to prepare 2 years ago. A voice recording of Choi Min-hyuk giving the orders for fraudulent accounting, and his personal notes chronicling his unjust termination. It was a collection of deadly weapons that could pierce the heart of Session Group. The moment the verdict was delivered, Choi Min-hyuk's eyes rolled back in his head. He suddenly jumped up and began to scream hysterically. "This is everything I have. Please, just keep my family safe." "No, what did I do wrong 30 years? This is murder, Kang Hana. All of this was planned by that bitch, Kang Hana. This is unfair." Chief Park held his hand firmly and promised, "Don't worry. From this moment on, you and your family are our top priority. We will ensure that your courage for justice is not in vain." His desperate wails continued as he was dragged out by court guards. But no one listened. His era, his arrogant tower, had ended so completely and miserably. Yoon Jae-hyuk's evidence was immediately sent to the command center in the Hanam-dong penthouse. The analysis team cheered. This was more than enough to bring down Choi Min-hyuk and Session Group. Breach of trust, embezzlement, tax evasion, violation of political funding laws. There was more than enough to hold them accountable in a court of law. Hana sat in the very back of the courtroom gallery, quietly watching the scene. Even as the verdict was being announced, her expression didn't change. She simply took in the final moments of a man's miserable collapse. Justice had been served. Now, it was her turn to heal the wounds and build a better world. But Kang Hana was not satisfied. Her expression remained cold. 1 year had passed since the legal judgment was passed on Choi Min-hyuk. The great storm that had shaken South Korea was now slowly fading from people's memories. But where the storm had passed, new order and hope were sprouting. This is only a part of that man's crimes. I don't want to just stop at him being a simple economic criminal. I want to destroy his soul so that he can never set foot in this society again. The place that had been Seishin Department Store now had a new sign, Cheonmu Plaza. The building was the same, but the atmosphere inside had completely changed. The arrogance and authoritarianism of the past were gone, replaced by a lively and egalitarian energy. The employees' faces no longer held the anxiety of being watched by their superiors, but were filled with pride in their work and a healthy smile. The team members held their breath, once again realizing how deep and chilling the young heiress's rage was. Kang Hana had changed everything about Cheonmu Plaza. She first prioritized improving employee welfare and protecting their human rights. All employees received fair treatment, and a symbiotic committee was established to allow them to report and be protected from any unjust treatment anonymously. The talented employees who had been oppressed by Choi Min-hyuk in the past returned to their jobs and were able to fully demonstrate their abilities. In particular, Hana's colleagues from the food court who had been forced to remain silent that day now held important roles in their respective departments and had a deep affection for their new workplace. Dig deeper into Choi Min-hyuk's past. Find every single instance of his abusive behavior and his trampling of the weak, without missing a single one. When we strip him of his armor of money and power, we will reveal to the world what a despicable and vile human being he really is. I want to pass a social death sentence, beyond legal punishment. Cheonmu Plaza became a symbol of a new retail model that embodied the values of coexistence and respect. Sales surpassed Seishin's past records, reaching new heights every day. Customers enthusiastically supported the store, consuming not only good products but also the healthy corporate culture behind them. According to Hana's orders, the information analysis team changed its focus. They began to thoroughly comb through Choi Min-hyuk's personal past, every move he had made since he joined Seishin Group. As they dug deeper, ugly truths began to surface. A small supplier's company was unilaterally ruined after Choi Min-hyuk verbally abused the owner and canceled their contract. A female employee was habitually sexually harassed. His driver was forced to kneel and was humiliated. His evil deeds were endless. He was a monster who had reigned as a tyrant in his kingdom, feeding on the blood and tears of the weak. And at the center of all this change was Kang Hana. Among the numerous victim cases, one file caught Hana's eye, a report titled, "The Forced Closure of the Luna Seoul Brand." She no longer hid her identity. She had moved out of the Hanam-dong penthouse and officially taken up residence in the vice president's office on the top floor of Cheonmu Group's headquarters in the heart of Seoul. Her office was a practical and stylish space without any unnecessary decorations. The floor-to-ceiling windows on one side of the wall offered a panoramic view of the city's dynamic landscape. The protagonist of the report was a young, emerging designer named Lee Seo-yeon. A few years ago, she had appeared like a comet in the fashion world with her original designs, her brand, Luna Seoul, which reinterpreted traditional Korean beauty in a modern way, became a massive hit among the younger generation. Seishin Department Store recognized her potential and, exceptionally for a new brand, offered her a pop-up store next to the luxury goods section on the first floor. She was now Cheonmu Group's vice president and future chairwoman. Dressed in a perfectly fitted business suit instead of a worn-out uniform, she exuded an undeniable charisma. But her eyes were still warm. Her experience of having lived at the bottom had not made her an arrogant ruler, but a true leader who could empathize. That's where the problem began. The pop-up store was a daily success, and Lee Seo-yeon's designs caught Choi Min-hyuk's eye. He coveted her talent. He approached Lee Seo-yeon and proposed a collaboration. But what he called a collaboration was essentially an act of plunder, an attempt to outright steal her designs. He demanded that Luna Seoul be absorbed into Seishin Department Store's private label and that Lee Seo-yeon would work as a salaried designer. Vice President, here's this month's activity report for the Hana Foundation, Chief Park said respectfully, handing her the documents. His face was filled with pride and deep trust, as if he were looking at his own daughter. Lee Seo-yeon refused, adamant that she would not give up the brand that was her soul. Choi Min-hyuk's attitude immediately changed. He began to pressure her with every vile method imaginable. The pop-up store contract was suddenly not renewed, and he spread malicious rumors that her designs were plagiarized from foreign luxury brands. He even pressured fabric suppliers and production factories to cut off all ties with Luna Seoul, the Hana Foundation. It was a non-profit organization Hana had established with her own money immediately after the Session Group incident was resolved. The foundation's sole purpose was to provide legal, psychological, and financial support to the socially vulnerable who suffered from unjust power in the workplace, just like Lee Seo-yeon, Yoon Jae-hyuk, or herself, the nameless part-timer. As a new brand, Luna Seoul could not withstand the comprehensive attack from the giant retail conglomerate. In the end, it went bankrupt within a year, accumulating massive debt. The dream and passion of a young designer were so brutally crushed. The last part of the report stated that Lee Seo-yeon was suffering from severe depression due to the shock and had left the industry to live in seclusion. Hana read the report carefully. That month, dozens of people had received help through the foundation. A contract employee who had been unjustly fired was reinstated with legal support, and a new employee who had been bullied by his boss received psychological counseling to heal his wounds and found a new job. The last page of the report had a few thank you letters from people who had received help from the foundation. As Hana read the sincere words written in shaky handwriting, her eyes became moist. Hana bit her lip as she read the report. A hot rage surged in her chest. This was not merely business harassment, it was a psychological murder that had completely destroyed a person's life and dream. This was a deeper wound than the humiliation she had suffered at Choi Min-hyuk's hands. Her anger now transcended personal revenge and transformed into a righteous mission for the trampled weak. Chief Park, we need to increase the foundation's funding a bit more. There are still so many people in our society who suffer alone in places we can't see. Lee Seo-yeon, find out where she is. I need to meet her myself. Understood. Miss, I will immediately propose it to the board. Chief Park looked at her in surprise. Miss, it could be dangerous. Your identity might be exposed. And it's about time you stopped calling me Miss. Hana joked with a gentle smile. Chief Park hesitated for a moment and smiled back. No, this is something I have to do myself, not as a strategist, but as a person who has experienced the same pain. Hana's voice was firm. That might take a little more time. Vice President, after some searching, they found Lee Seo-yeon's residence a shabby, old rooftop apartment on the outskirts of Seoul. It was a miserable place. Hard to believe that this was the home of a genius who was once called the future of Korean fashion. Hana disregarded Chief Park's warnings and went to her apartment alone. Dressed in ordinary clothes, a warm laugh passed between the two. For the loyal old man who had watched over her for so long, she was still the precious miss he wanted to protect. She knocked on the door, and after a long while, it opened. The Lee Seo-yeon who stood in the doorway was a completely different person from the vibrant woman in the report. Her face was haggard and lifeless. Her eyes were empty, and her hair was unkempt. She looked at the unfamiliar visitor with sharp suspicion. After Chief Park left, Hana was alone again. She stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. The evening sky over Seoul was beautifully painted with a red sunset. Countless buildings formed a forest, and the Han River flowing below them sparkled with a golden light. Who are you? She remembered the humiliating moment she had experienced in the food court a year ago. It was the darkest time in her life. But paradoxically, it was also the moment that had allowed her to be reborn as a true leader. If it hadn't happened, she might have remained a naive hothouse flower or a cold strategist who only learned about the world through numbers. Hello, Ms. Lee Seo-yeon. I came because I have something to tell you. Do you have a moment? Hana's voice was as gentle as possible. Lee Seo-yeon looked her up and down and snapped. If you're a reporter, leave. I have nothing to say. But now she knew. True power does not come from money or authority. It comes from winning people's hearts. True leadership is not about ruling, but about sharing the pain and moving forward together. I'm not a reporter. I'm another person who was hurt by director Choi Min-hyuk. She was no longer bound by the wounds of the past. Those wounds were now a part of her, a solid foundation that allowed her to fly higher. At the name Choi Min-hyuk. Lee Seo-yeon's eyes trembled. It was as if the wound buried deep in her heart had been touched again. She hesitated for a long time, then reluctantly opened the door. Choi Min-hyuk? The apartment was cluttered with fabric and design sketches. But they did not seem like traces of passionate new creation. They looked like the remnants of a past glory she couldn't let go of. She whispered his name without realizing it. He was now paying for his sins inside a cold prison. She did not hate or pity him. He was just a lesson in her life who had asked her the solemn questions of, why must I be stronger, and how should I use my power, and had disappeared. The two women sat facing each other in the small room. An awkward silence hung in the air. Hana spoke first. Hana quietly made a promise to the Night View of Seoul. As she led Cheonmu Group, she would face many challenges and crises. There might be times when she had to make difficult decisions and fight lonely battles. But she was not afraid. She was no longer alone. She had people who believed in her and followed her. And she had her own unwavering sense of justice and philosophy in her heart. I also went through something similar because of that man recently. In front of a lot of people. An unforgivable humiliation. The storm had passed, and the wounds had healed into solid calluses. Now, before her lay a serene and brilliant dawn after the storm. Receiving the light of the dawn, she took her first courageous step toward her era as a true leader who would lead not only South Korea, but the world. Without revealing her identity, Hana calmly recounted what happened to her in the food court. Her story was not exaggerated, nor was it an emotional plea, but the deep pain and anger in it were fully conveyed to Lee Seo-yeon's heart. Lee Seo-yeon's frozen eyes began to waver. For the first time, she had met someone who shared her pain. I want to get revenge on him, but I don't want to stop at just personal revenge. I want to create a world where victims like you and me can never be trampled on again. A world where money and power don't give people the right to carelessly trample on the dreams and dignity of others.